The views and opinions expressed on any program are those of the producers and/or the persons appearing on the program and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of FRCMedia, Bristol Community College, or the City of Fall River.
This week on FRCmedia News, 6 months after the Gabriel House fire, a state commission has released its report on assisted living facilities that includes lessons learned from the tragedy. Cold, flu, and COVID cases are at high levels across Massachusetts, and a local home goods distribution center seeks donations and volunteers. All this and more coming up. It's Thursday, January 15th, 2026. This is FRCmedia News. I'm Keith Tebow. It's been 6 months since the Gabriel House Assisted Living Facility fatal fire in Fall River. A special state commission charged with making recommendations to improve the assisted living industry released its final report this week with public safety suggestions in response to the fire. Robin Lipson, Secretary of Executive Office of Aging and Independence, chaired the commission, which began its work a year ago. It was given an extension to complete its work following the fire in July that killed 10 residents and injured many others. The secretary says the public safety recommendations in the report reflect changes to policy that will be helpful in handling any future emergencies at assisted living facilities.
To make sure that the emergency and evacuation plans that they have are actually approved by the local officials and are on file. I think there was a lot of variation in how that was done. And so we have really tried to clarify and set a standard for the industry. We also looked at some very simple things that we know would have made a difference at Gabriel House. If rooms had been labeled, if there had been a way to indicate that behind that door is a resident's apartment, or behind that door is a storage closet, that would have helped first responders prioritize, where they focus their efforts. The other thing that would have helped is if there was an up-to-date census on who lived in the building and who might have special needs in the instance of an evacuation. So that might be people who need wheelchairs or walkers, but it might also be people who are hearing impaired or visually impaired, or have some cognitive limitations and might need some help in evacuating.
The secretary says cities and towns in Massachusetts have begun taking notice of deficiencies within their public safety protocols regarding assisted living residences.
And what's happened since July is that many municipalities and municipal officials have reached out to assisted living residences and other congregate living style residences in their community to have these conversations. We've heard many anecdotes about, the fire chief or the building inspector coming by and just saying, "Hey, can I talk with you? Can I walk through? Can I see firsthand what this is like? Can I scope it out?" So we know that's already happening, and we now will require that in changes we will make to our regulations. Most of this is work we can do with our existing administrative and regulatory authorities, so it does not have to go back to the legislature, which means we can act on it fairly quickly.
Secretary Lipson says by standardizing public safety policies and regularly updating resident information at assisted living facilities, municipalities will be better suited to handle emergencies.
There are a lot of participants in this industry who already use the very best practices around safety, whether it is having evacuation drills on every shift or making sure that any employee, even if they're a temporary employee, knows what the evacuation plan is. There are residences out there that already do that. But some of what we learned through this tragedy is that we have to be far more prescriptive about what the standard is, and that we have to be far more rigorous in how we look at the documentation that they've met the standard. So that's really the focus going forward, is that we are very clear about what the requirements are, and that we are very prescriptive in the kinds of documentation that must be available, that we can then objectively look at and certify that the requirement has been met.
Fall River Mayor Paul Coogan says the city played a direct role in providing evidence in the formulation of the Commission's recommendations.
They used a lot of the ideas from both the recommendations from our public safety people, particularly the fire chief, our building inspectors. They came down, when we had that initial meeting with the governor here, and people were kicking around ideas. If you look at some of the safety inspections they're talking about, consistent record keeping, posting prices, let people know what it costs, training for staff, making sure they understand things. There's a number of recommendations in that report that I know came out of conversations around the Gabriel House fire in the city of Fall River. And sometimes a little light comes out of a terrible tragedy that we went through, and hopefully this can strengthen programs across the state and make people feel safer and more comfortable when they are in an ALR.
In the meantime, the city is moving forward on plans to increase minimum staffing levels within the fire department.
It is hitting the overtime pretty hard, which is why, if you notice, the chief is advocating to get some of these hybrid firemen in, because they don't need to go to training. They go straight into, with minimum training, they get right on a truck for us and pitch in right away to reduce some of the overtime. So that's kind of the bend we're taking right now. We're trying to commit with the commitment we made to the union and the residents of Fall River. We're trying to definitely stay with that. And so far, other than a few glitches, sometimes we may have had a couple of problems with getting people in for the overtime. And to solve that, we're trying to get people onto the trucks as fast as we can. So that's where we stand, and we're holding up our end of the bargain. It seems like the fire department is too.
We're about a month into winter, and cases of seasonal respiratory illnesses are at some of their highest levels in years across Massachusetts and here in Fall River.
Flu season, or respiratory virus season, runs from October through May. So we're kind of in the early stages of it. And so if folks haven't received their flu vaccine, still really important to get that. We are seeing those high rates, and the flu vaccine can vary each year in terms of its effectiveness. But regardless, it will still help to reduce symptoms and even help to kind of reduce some of that spread that we're seeing. Also, staying home when you're sick, all those basic, kind of back to COVID times where if you're experiencing symptoms, stay home. Masking certainly helps. Washing your hands and staying out when you're experiencing those symptoms, or when you've had a fever. Without fever reducing medication, you still want to stay home for that 24 hours after you've had a fever.
Ms. Curran says vulnerable populations like the elderly are especially susceptible to getting sick. There has also been an alarming spike in cases among children.
Within Massachusetts, there's already been 4 pediatric deaths related to the flu this season so far. So again, we're getting hit earlier than we have historically in years past in terms of that spike. Doesn't usually come until later in the flu season, more around February. We're seeing numbers that kind of mimic what we see typically in February now. So, we're anticipating it to just be a really difficult flu season. But there are certainly challenges within the pediatric population. We're seeing those 4 deaths, sadly, amongst kids. So anyone 6 months and older should again be getting that flu shot.
Cases of COVID are also higher in Fall River than in years past, and are at times difficult to detect.
Those symptoms can mirror if you have any respiratory virus symptoms, you're likely either going to have the flu or COVID. If you are able to get a test, certainly helpful to have a sense of that. But I know certain, physicians' offices are trying to limit the patients coming in. If you're able to, handle it at home, certainly have to talk to your healthcare provider. But what I've been hearing is that some offices are really only hoping that high risk, elderly, pregnant women, kids are taking some of those appointments. Other folks are able, if you're able to stay home, but if you need to seek medical care, then certainly need to do so.
The current owners of WSAR Radio have announced plans to sell the 102-year-old station to City Councilor and local business owner Cliff Ponte and Michael Sylvia, co-owner of local news websites Fall River Reporter and New Bedford Guide. James and Robert Karam have owned WSAR since 1992, serving the information needs of Fall River and the surrounding suburbs. During an announcement Saturday on the WSAR Weekend Update program, hosted by current General Manager Sue Netter, James Karam said that he and his brother are or will soon be retiring, and it's time to seek new ownership for the radio station.
Over the next several months, Mike Cliff, as I mentioned, will take over management of the station on a day-to-day basis. And during that period, we will be completing agreements and filings to allow a transfer of the station to Mike and Cliff. The plan, as we see it, will continue to provide a locally focused program format for the station, including, as I said, the city and the suburbs, and will be a very positive continuation of what's taking place in the past.
Councilor Ponte says he plans to move the station from its studios in Somerset to a location in Fall River. Before becoming an accomplished real estate broker, business owner, and city politician, Councilor Ponte was an on-air personality at WSAR and other local radio stations. He said he understands the desire to carry the station's legacy forward.
What is important to us is for us to continue a legacy and make a local radio station even more prominent than it is. This station has been a part of people's lives for over 100 years. And what was important to Mike and I when we collaborated on this, first time we've ever collaborated on from a business perspective, is to make sure that this station continues and is a bigger part of our community. And what Mr. Karam said is just exactly that. We want to continue a tradition, we want to continue a legacy, and we want to make the station bigger and better. And with the people that are here and the ideas that Mike and I have, we believe that it's going to be bigger and better than it ever has been, with no slight on anybody when we say that, which is to revolutionize a station that's been a huge part of the community is something that is important to us. The local journalism, local advertising, being a part of the community, getting out for live remotes and working on that is part of our greater vision.
Mr. Sylvia, who will serve as general manager, plans to create a program schedule with live local hosts from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. and leverage the online reach of the Fall River Reporter and New Bedford Guide to drive listeners to WSAR.
That's the real role of media, is to, in my view, is to really hold your local politicians accountable, look at corruption. We all remember that when Jazel versus Coogan kept saying the dark cloud over the city, and I think we've had less journalism in the city since then, and that's something we can't have. We need more journalists out there. We need more, and that's what I think we can do here with a 24/7 operation. Is really, Alan's been in this forever, right? He does great news. We want to add another person to come here potentially. We want to have more news. We need more news to come into this station. Because again, what I said in the beginning, if I hear something on social media, the great thing about radio is I should be able to turn on the radio and hear those stories eventually, right? And that's a great match I think we can find with social media and radio, is really pair those two.
As a potential future owner of a local media outlet, Councilor Ponte expects criticism from those who may allege that he might censor opinions from those who do not agree with his and his allies' positions in local government.
I'm open to the same constructive criticism, by the way, as an elected official, as anybody would. If I mess up or if I do something wrong, or you want to criticize my vote, you go on the radio and you do that, right? And I will happily defend myself. Do I want a show one day? I don't know, maybe. We'll see, right? You can call and yell at me there too. But I'll just say that I understand what it may look like. My position here is to focus more on the programming, the imaging, the radio fundamentals, and Mike will be working on the day-to-day stuff.
The transfer of the WSAR radio license is likely to take months as the parties seek approval from the Federal Communications Commission. It's time now to take a look at some other economic development and business news in Fall River. I'm joined, as I am on a weekly basis, by Kevin Lawrence. He is the owner, editor, and publisher of Fall River Development News, which you can find on Facebook. Kevin, how are you this week?
Good, and happy to be here again.
All right, let's start with, some medical center news. There's a large facility on Robeson Street that is now up for sale.
It's known as Highland Place, located at 1151 Robeson Street in the city of Fall River. It's been listed for sale. You are correct, Keith. Back in October of last year, Obstetrical Associates, Inc. closed their 3,000 square foot practice. They were located on the second floor of the building. In November of 2024, Highland Urgent Care opened its doors inside the lower level of that Highland Place building, formerly the Highland School. That is still there, but they do have vacancy on the second floor. Stephen Gugliardi, a primary care physician, bought that building back in 2013 and completed work on it in 2016. He also operates that urgent care center on the lower level, and that building is now for sale.
Any idea what they may be looking? I mean, it's a very valuable property. They've done, as you said, they've done a lot of work in that building.
They haven't. They did not put an asking price on the listing, so we do not know how much they are asking for it, but it is for sale.
Very interesting. We'll see how that transpires.
Yeah.
All right, let's shift our gears now to the south end of the city. Actually, at the very base of Middle Street, across from Bay Street, there's a vacant mill there that's going to be finding some new occupants and some new activity.
This is the historic Algonquin Mill at 1 Middle Street. It's on a site that comprises of 8.85 acres, and they're looking to do some market rate apartments there. We found out at the historical commission meeting from Emily, hope I'm pronouncing her last name right, Domenjani. She's a historical consultant with Orion LLC, and she told the commission that 190 apartments are planned for that mill site, which consists actually of 5 buildings. It would be a phased redevelopment that would start with the smaller buildings, and the large mill building would be completed last. The property was developed by the Algonquin Printing Company back in 1891. It was the last 19th century printing operation to be established in the city. The surviving main building was built in 1902. The company actually operated on that site up until 1941, and the site was later occupied by Pioneer Finishing Corporation and later Duro Textiles. There was a fire there in 2010. Which was deemed to be arson at the time. It broke out in the boiler room portion of the main mill complex, destroying several buildings. However, that main mill building was saved, and looks like it's going to be turned into 198 market rate apartments soon.
Yeah, and again, just for sake of where people may think it is, if you know the Tomato Center down in off Bay Street, it's behind that as you head toward the water. On the south end of Fall River. So interesting information, that's for sure.
It's a blighted property, and it's got waterfront views, so potentially it could be some real high-end apartments going in there.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, you can catch Kevin's work on Fall River Development News on Facebook. Please give him a like and a follow. Kevin, we'll talk again next week. Take care.
Thank you, Keith.
Here are some job descriptions on the latest hot jobs list from the Mass Hire Fall River Career Center. High school science teacher, Argosy Collegiate Charter School, located at 240 Dover Street, is looking for a full-time high school science teacher to design and implement lesson plans for specific science subjects such as biology, chemistry, and physics. Job number 236-37490. Overnight Order Selector, NASA Fruit Company, located at 538 Plymouth Avenue, seeks a full-time overnight order selector to accurately pick and pack orders according to customer specifications and company standards. Job number 236-38552. Quality Control Technician, Whirlpool Corporation, located at 88 Current Road, is seeking a full-time quality control technician, responsible for solving quality problems on dryers by taking measurements, testing, and repairs. Job number 236-36032. Medical Assistant, Agape Dermatology Fall River, located at 775 Davall Street, is urgently looking for a full-time medical assistant. For more information, call 774-488-5888. St. Anne's Hospital, located at 795 Middle Street, has an immediate need for the following full and part-time positions. ICU registered nurse, job number 236-34534. Endoscopy technician, job number 236-34523. For more information about these or other positions, visit Mass Hire JobQuest at jobquest.dcs.eol.mass.gov or call the Mass Hire Fall River Career Center at 508-730-5000.
Once they all believed in dragons, when the world was fresh and young. We were woven into legends. Tales were told and songs were sung. We were treated with obeisance. We were honored. We were feared. Then one day they stopped believing. On that day, we disappeared. Now they say our time is over. Now they say we've lived our last. Now we're treated with derision, where once we ruled unsurpassed. We must make them all remember. In some way, we must reveal that our spirit lives forever. We are dragons. We are real. Here there be dragons and other creatures that never were at the Narrow Center for the Arts, 16 Anawan Street in Fall River, Massachusetts. An exploration into the realm of dragons inspired by world mythology, folklore, and literature. Other creatures, both fierce and fabulous, taken from the furthest corners of man's imagination, will also be featured in these three-dimensional ceramic sculptures. Fall River artist David Mello invites you to come face to face and claw to claw with these remarkable, timeless creatures of legend. January 17th through March 28th. Reception date, January 24th. 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock p.m.
Welcome back. For over 10 years, United Neighbors of Fall River's Home Project has been a resource for community members returning to independent living to get back on their feet.
The Home Project is essentially a free thrift store for anyone in transition. So transitioning from an unsheltered situation into stable housing. And that can look like a lot of things. That could be somebody leaving a residential treatment facility. That could be somebody leaving a traditional shelter. It could be due to incarceration. It could be a foster youth aging out of the system. So essentially, it's the basic household items. We don't accept furniture. We don't provide that. My brother's keeper out of Dartmouth handles furniture. So we provide the other things like sheets, towels, curtains, pots and pans, a little bit of home decor, anything that you would need when you're first starting out into an apartment of your own.
Due to limited staff, the Home Project location is open by appointment only and via referral.
Over the past year, we've serviced between 90 and 140 visits. So either an individual coming to shop or a family of 3, 4, 5 come to shop. And those numbers actually represent about a double of what we've seen for the 3 years prior. So we've seen a 300% increase in clients coming here. The cost of living has increased and folks are having a hard time not only finding housing, but coming up with that first, last, security, that whole chunk of expenses to first move in, that we've noticed an influx here at the Home Project for those folks who can afford to move in, but then can't afford to furnish the place.
As the need grows, the Home Project is seeking specific items to stock the store.
The most urgent need are your basics, things like pots and pans, silverware, a microwave, a vacuum, those kinds of things that folks don't donate often because they don't break down often. We're lucky that through the United Way and Matuk, we tend to get a fair amount of linens donated, but then also things like towels, blankets, especially this time of year, and then even things like humidifiers are all things that people are looking for to stock their home when they first move in. The mission here is really two-pronged. One, it's about preserving people's dignity. It's also about that sustainability and environment issue. And, you know, folks say a broken teacup is better than no teacup, but that's not how we feel here. Again, it's all about preserving folks' dignity. So we ask that if a donation is not something that you would utilize in your own household, then please don't bring it here for our clients.
The Home Project is setting aside time to accept donations and those willing to volunteer to organize the store. The next opportunity is this Saturday.
We'll be open every third Saturday of the month from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. Now, we don't publish the address of the Home Project because we are only open by appointment only. So if folks are interested in donating something, they can contact me at United Neighbors of Fall River. Our phone number is 508-324-7900 and email is info@unfr.org.
We'll wrap up this edition of FRC Media News after this.
Once they all believed in dragons, when the world was fresh and young. We were woven into legends. Tales were told and songs were sung. We were treated with obeisance. We were honored. We were feared. Then one day they stopped believing. On that day, we disappeared. Now they say our time is over. Now they say we've lived our last. Now we're treated with derision, where once we ruled unsurpassed. We must make them all remember. In some way, we must reveal that our spirit lives forever. We are dragons. We are real. Here there be dragons and other creatures that never were at the Narrow Center for the Arts, 16 Anawan Street in Fall River, Massachusetts. An exploration into the realm of dragons inspired by world mythology, folklore, and literature. Other creatures, both fierce and fabulous, taken from the furthest corners of man's imagination, will also be featured in these three-dimensional ceramic sculptures. Fall River artist David Mello invites you to come face to face and claw to claw with these remarkable, timeless creatures of legend. January 17th through March 28th. Reception date, January 24th. 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock p.m.
That'll do it for this week's edition of FRC Media News. Please visit our website, frmedia.org, for more local news and information. You can catch FRC Media News Thursdays at 6 p.m. and Fridays at 5:30 p.m. on Channel 95 and the Fall River HD channel, which is located on Channel 1072. For all of us here at FRC Media News, I'm Keith Tebow. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next Thursday.